May 23rd, 1934, we're in the small town of Gippsland, Louisiana. It's 9 a.m. A well-known couple in love and crime are gunned down in their stolen 1934 Ford Model 730 Deluxe sedan. For 21 months, these two, along with the Barrow Gang, had gone from state to state, robbing, stealing, and killing authorities and innocent people. The stuff of legends, their story has been depicted in songs, plays, books, and at least 11 movies, some even produced by J. Edgar Hoover himself. They were the loves of each other's lives. Inseparable, these two would go down in a hail of bullets together. This is the story of Bonnie and Clyde. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Everybody.
Yes, welcome.
We've got a real lovers podcast today.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories too, and I love the movie with Warren Beatty and.
I've never seen the movie. I did that on purpose, actually.
Yeah,
it was produced in 1967.
Right.
I was a wee one back in 1967.
Yep.
So it wasn't like it was something that I would see in the movie theater. And I know it's been out forever and they show it all the time, but I've just never watched it. Don't know how accurate it is. So maybe since you've seen the movie as I go through this, you'll be able to tell me.
Yeah.
Because I got news for everybody. This case, there's so much stuff about this case, and there's so many conflicting stories about this case because their families tell one story. The FBI, they tell a completely different story.
Right.
Everybody's got their own little tale about Bonnie and Clyde. And I saw an interview with with Clyde's youngest sister who said they never tell it right, which I thought was interesting. But we're going to get started before we do. Like, rate, and review Hitched to Homicide. That helps other people to find us. You can always go and leave us a review. We love that, and we might even read it on the show.
Right.
You can go join the Facebook group, the In-Laws and Outlaws, which is growing by leaps and bounds day by day. We just want to stop and say thanks to everybody. The podcast has gotten just a tremendous amount of attention and downloads, and we're just really happy that you guys are along for the ride for all of this.
Yes, we are. And audio alert, if you hear little pitter-patters and rustles.
Yeah, Scotty's in the studio with us.
He's in the studio with us, and he's very active today. We'll put it that way.
He doesn't want to cooperate for the podcast, but that's okay. We'll let him in. So
little extra for you today.
Yeah, a little extra rescue pup for you today. Before we get started, I want to thank some sources: the Daily News and more, Bonnie and Clyde History.blogspot.com, FBI.gov, Wikipedia, History.com, ThoughtCo.com, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram from May 24th, 1934, TexasHistory.edu, the Shreveport Times, May 24th, 1934, crimemuseum.org, BBC Time Watch, Remembering Bonnie and Clyde by Turquoise Film and Video, biography.com, texashideout.com, Texas History Notebook, and Texas Monthly. What a long list of sources. They'll all be in the show notes. Once again, there's lots and lots about this, so let's do it. Clyde Chestnut Barrow is born on March 24th, 1909 to Henry and Cuny Barrow in Tellico, Texas, about 35 miles south of Dallas.
Okay.
His family's poor. He's the fifth of 7 children. Clyde's father, Henry, is an illiterate sharecropper. He moves his wife and their 7 children from the small town of Tellico to West Dallas, a place they call the Devil's Back Porch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Few homes had running water or electricity, and some didn't even have doors or glass windows. This is a time where jobs are non-existent. Between 1920 and 1940, the population of Dallas doubled because thousands of families were forced off their land due to the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. These people would settle in squatters' camps under the viaducts along the river bottoms, and they lived in tents and cardboard homes. And Henry moves his family to one of these camps around 1920 on Muncie Street next to the West Dallas Railroad track. And Clyde's parents have older children who'd already moved to West Dallas. Clyde was 11 at that time, and he never forgot the humiliation of living in the squatters' camp. He enrolled in the 6th grade at Sidney Lanier Elementary, but quit after a week and moved in with his older sister, Nell, and took a job at a candy company. Nell spoiled him, and her husband was a musician.
Oh, wow.
And he taught Clyde how to play the saxophone.
Oh, that's cool.
He loved his saxophone, which along with guns became a lifelong obsession. Soon he was supplementing his income by stealing bicycles and hubcaps, and meanwhile Henry Barrow built a 3-room house for his remaining family and hacked out a meager living picking up scrap metal in his horse cart and selling it.
Wow.
This was just really a tough time.
Sure. Everybody was trying to do what they could do just to make a buck.
Yeah, and when his father's horse is killed by a car while crossing the Houston Street Viaduct, Henry sued and won a small sum, and with that money he moved his house to a vacant lot on Eagle Ford Road and converted the front room into a service station and store.
Wait, he moved the entire house?
He moved the entire house.
How'd they do that?
I guess they picked it up and moved it. I've seen a picture. It's not that big.
Okay.
But the point I'm making here is he took his house, the money that he had made, and then he moves the house to a location, and then he makes the front room a little store.
Gotcha.
While they're living in the back, and then he opens a service station, a gas station in the front.
All right.
And this service station still stands today at the corner of Singleton and Borger in West Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
Clyde is a small young man. He's only about 5'6" and a half, 5'7". He has brown hair, brown eyes, black eyes, as somebody would later recall. And Clyde has a girlfriend. Her name is Eleanor B. Williams, or E.B.
E.B.
Clyde first met E.B. in 1925 while she was still a student at the Forest Avenue High School in Dallas. Clyde fell head over heels for her. He liked E.B. well enough to get a tattoo with a heart and dagger and the initials EBW on his outer arm for Eleanor B. Williams.
How old was he at this time?
17, I believe. Yeah, 17. Oh, the follies of youth.
Oh, yeah.
One day in the fall of 1926, after a big argument with Clyde, E.B. leaves to visit her family in San Augustine County. After Clyde sulked for a little bit, he's 17, he rented a Model T Ford car at Nichols Brothers in Dallas for the afternoon because he's going to drive to find her. He wants to patch things up. He gets E.B.'s mother, Catherine, to ride with him from Dallas so that they could visit Catherine's younger sister, Effie. Okay. So she's
Effie
gone.
and E.B.
I know. She's gone to visit her Aunt Catherine. He picks up E.B.'s mom, and they're going to visit Catherine's younger sister, Effie.
All right.
There's a lot of this going on. And if you read old newspapers, there are actually columns where it'll be like, so-and-so's niece was in from Chicago, and they had tea and cake. The little section. So people always knew who was coming in and out of town and what was going on. Visiting was a big thing.
Yeah, my grandmother, my grandma Pottorff, she was a journalist, and she wrote, I think, some sort of column like that for the Piqua Daily Call.
Yeah, I mean, it was big. That was big news.
Yeah.
But Clyde gets there, and Clyde and E.B. did make up, and everything was fine for a while. He even stayed there for several days, supposedly forgetting that he had a rental car in the driveway.
Oops.
That was 2 days past due. Meanwhile, the Nichols brothers, the rental firm, had become nervous about their missing Model T, the 17-year-old who rented it and drove it away, because Clyde had failed to tell the Nichols brothers that he was taking the car out of Dallas County.
Oh, wow.
Which would have called for a more expensive rental fee.
Of course.
And after trying unsuccessfully to locate Clyde, they discovered that he had gone to San Augustine County. Now, they filed an official complaint, and soon the county sheriff, Judge Wilkinson, dispatched a couple of deputies to White City to find Clyde and the car. And when the deputy sheriff showed up at the Burkett farm looking for him, he slipped out the back door and ran through the cornfield. He's hiding out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine? This is my boyfriend. Then the police show up. Then he starts running.
Not a good first impression.
Not a good first impression. And after commanding the fleeing youth to halt, that's what I read.
Yeah.
They're like, stop. And he keeps going. They fired their guns at him.
Oh, my gosh.
And Clyde hid in the woods until the heat died down, but it was early evening before he felt safe enough to go back to the farmhouse. The cops are gone, but so is the Model T. The next day, Sheriff Wilkinson himself showed up, and the Burketts, the family, her aunt, hid Clyde in their attic. E.B. passes notes up to Clyde as the sheriff searches the house, and eventually he gives up and leaves, and E.B.'s mother is not happy. She insisted that they break off the engagement immediately. You're done.
Yeah.
It's over. You're not going to marry this guy.
Imagine
and Clyde had to hitchhike back to Dallas.
Wow.
Clyde Barrow was arrested on December 3rd, 1926 in Dallas for the theft of the car. It was his first official crime, and later the rental agency would decline to press charges. But Clyde's in the system now. He's officially, it's on, you know how they used to say, this is a mark on your permanent record.
Right,
Well,
right.
Clyde's got a mark on his permanent record.
Yeah, that's a pretty big mark.
Yes. It's around this time that Clyde starts hanging out with his older brother, Marvin Ivan.
Huh.
Marvin Ivan. Who named that kid?
Yeah.
But he goes by Buck, a nickname given to him by an aunt who saw him play acting, that he was a horse when he was a little boy. And I have to think that Buck is way better than Marvin Ivan, but yeah. Buck's a bad influence. He's a part of the Dallas petty crime underworld. He's a few years older than Clyde. Buck's 23, Clyde's 17.
Okay.
And Buck has already been married twice and divorced twice. And he's got 3 children from those marriages. Buck was involved in cockfighting with roosters and dog fights. Not a good human.
Wow.
Anybody who's cruel to animals, you're off my list.
And he's 23 and he's been married twice.
Well, yeah. They got married young back then.
Yeah.
They got busy young.
Yeah.
I mean, the life expectancy wasn't like it is now.
Yeah. Well,
So,
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Especially if you're, what?
Jerry Lee Lewis married his 13-year-old cousin.
Oh, my gosh. I know. Making the Southerners look bad. No. But after Clyde is picked up for keeping the rental car too long, he and Buck are arrested right before Christmas and 3 weeks later for stealing a truckload of turkeys.
Oh, my God.
That was my pregnant pause.
Wow.
Turkeys. They were planning to sell them for the holidays. It's right before Christmas. Buck takes the rap for both of them and goes to jail for a week. When he's out, Buck is stealing cars and then selling them all over Texas. Clyde, on the other hand, has some legitimate jobs between 1927 and 1929, but he also cracked safes, robbed stores, and stole cars just like his brother. And the police are harassing Clyde a little bit. I mean, anything that goes down, they look at him, mostly because he had a brother, Buck, who was this bad seed.
Right.
And Buck is already in jail by 1929, and he escapes in 1930. There were so many jailbreaks during this time. It was crazy. I'm like, how are they holding them in? Saran wrap? I couldn't figure it out. It was just everything I read. But Clyde isn't far behind him, and as the stock market has crashed and banks were closing, unemployment was soaring, 13 million people were out of work, and remember the one time the nation needed a drink, Prohibition and the Volstead Act was in full steam ahead.
The timing wasn't a great thing back then.
No. But Clyde is obsessed with his saxophone and his guitar, which he has also learned to play.
Oh, wow.
I knew this is something that Rob would like about Clyde Barrow.
Of course.
He's also obsessed with his guns. And at this point, he has participated in robberies in Sherman, Denton, and Waco, Texas. Now, hold that thought.
Okay.
And I do want to say robberies. There are no murders, no homicides. He's participated in robberies.
Okay.
And if you read the papers from the 1920s, there were lots of robberies. Everybody was stealing everything because nobody had anything.
Right.
Bonnie Elizabeth Parker is born on October 1st, 1910, in Rowena, Texas. Bonnie is the second of 3 children. She grew up a few miles to the west of Devil's Back Porch on the farm of her maternal grandmother, and she attended Eagle Ford Elementary. She was a bright and popular student. She won writing prizes, essay writing prizes, spelling bees. She was a natural show-off who loved play acting and being the center of attention.
So she was smart.
She was smart. She was cute. She had a magnetic personality. She was famously tender-hearted. She was known to break a pencil in half and give half to a classmate, somebody who couldn't afford it.
Oh, nice.
But she could also be tough. And when she's in a school play, a little boy upstages her, and Bonnie punches him. She decks him in the middle of the show.
Just like a true entertainer.
Just like a true, don't steal my spotlight. And the audience breaks into applause. And Bonnie is so inspired by it all. She starts doing a series of cartwheels and somersaults. She's like, guess what else I can do?
Jeez.
So she's doing all this. And Bonnie dreamed. They all laughed, by the way. Everybody thought it was amazing. They break into applause. And they're clapping for her. And Bonnie dreamed of a career as a singer, an actress, or a poet.
Nice.
Now, Bonnie is tiny. This is something I guess I didn't realize. I've seen the pictures of her, but she's not even 5 feet tall. She's about 4'11", 4'10", and she tips the scales around 75 to 80 pounds.
Gee whiz,
She's teensy-tiny. And it's been a debate forever just how small her feet were, of all things.
Why?
I saw that her shoe size was a 3.5.
Good Lord.
That's like a 7-inch foot.
Yeah.
That's tiny.
Yeah.
She works as a waitress, and when she's 16 years old, she falls in love with a man named Roy Thornton. They meet in high school. She fell hard, and I read that in a rush of girlish devotion, she went out and had Roy and Bonnie and a heart tattooed on her inner thigh.
Oh, did they do that kind of stuff back then?
Apparently, because he's got E.B. on his shoulder, now she's got Roy on her inner thigh.
Wow.
These two are married September 25th, 1926, when Bonnie was 16. However, they were only together a little more than a year, separating for the third and final time in December of 1927 due to her husband's infidelity.
Oops.
Roy is ratting around. He's getting around.
So Roy didn't get a tattoo.
Roy obviously doesn't have the tattoo on his inner thigh for someone to go, oh, you belong to somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Roy is thought to have tried to reunite with Bonnie, another time, maybe a couple of times in 1929 and 1931, but he was brutally rebuffed by Bonnie. That's your movie trivia, the first one.
Okay.
There's your movie.
All right.
Brutally rebuffed. But Roy's a lousy husband. He would disappear for weeks at a time. He would cheat on her. And he was a safecracker and a thief.
Oh, wow. A man of many talents.
I know, right? Bonnie vows to her friends that she's never going to take him back and resolves, as many women have said after being in less than a desirable relationship, I highlighted that where I wrote it, to quote, take no men or nothing seriously. Let all men go to hell, end quote. That was Bonnie's quote. Yep. Yeah. We've all been there, ladies. We've all been there. And although they remain separated for the rest of their lives, Bonnie and Roy will never divorce, and she will wear his wedding ring until her dying day.
Really?
Yes. She never takes the wedding ring off.
Was there any explanation for that?
Nope. Maybe it was stuck. But Crisco is cheap. Lard is cheap. Get that thing off.
Maybe she just liked the ring.
Maybe she did, or maybe we'll get to that. Maybe she wanted people to think that she was actually with Clyde. She was married to Clyde.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Who knows?
Yeah.
2 years later, on January 5th, 1930, Bonnie, Parker, and Clyde Barrow meet at the home of Clyde's friend, Clarence Clay, at 105 Herbert Street in West Dallas. Clyde is 20, Bonnie is 19. She's out of work and living with her friend and helping her out because she'd suffered a broken arm. Now, there are those who say this friend was actually Clyde's sister. So there are two different stories here. It's Clyde's sister that broke her arm, and that's why he showed up there, or it's her friend, or maybe her friend is Clyde's sister.
Okay.
But it was a little murky there.
Right.
Regardless, Clyde drops by this girl, his sister's home, and Bonnie's in the kitchen making hot chocolate. It was love at first sight for the both of them, and they spent the whole night talking. And after that evening, they spent almost every day together for the next few months.
Okay.
So they're inseparable from this point on.
Instant sparks.
Instant sparks. And I was thinking, she's his size. He's like 5'6.5", 5'7".
Right.
She's 4 foot nothing.
And she's cute.
And she's really cute. She has like auburn hair, big blue eyes, and yeah, she's really cute.
Let's hear it for the auburn hair.
Well, I heard someone say there was an old lady who was interviewed who said she was what we call a dishwater blonde. I was like, hey, back up. Don't get on the dishwater blondes, okay? We just need some sunshine and then we become brighter blondes. But wait a second. But yeah, so she sort of had auburn dishwater blonde hair. But these two are inseparable. And meanwhile, Clyde has managed to assemble a group of ruffians and began terrorizing small shop owners through holdups and burglaries. He told Bonnie that he needed to get out of town because the police had compiled a lot of evidence in order to arrest him. Okay. And I would think she'd go at this point, but her husband is a safecracker and is, going to go to jail. So I guess it was just kind of, oh, okay, he's in trouble with the law again, the long arm of the law.
Pass the ketchup.
Yeah, there's the laws at the door. My grandmother said that one time because I had a cousin who rode a motorcycle too fast. We were in North Carolina where my people are from. And the doorbell rang, and my grandmother looks out the window. She goes, "The law's here." The law's at the door. So, yeah, they were used to the law being after everybody.
Wow.
But Bonnie's in love, and she takes him home to meet her mom. What do you do with your criminal boyfriend?
Yeah.
You bring him home.
Another one.
Yeah, and Clyde is sleeping on Emma Parker. That's Bonnie's mom. He's sleeping on her sofa when the cops show up to haul him off to jail for the robberies he was wanted for in Sherman, Denton, and Waco, Texas.
Okay.
And Bonnie screams and cries for them not to take him away. She beat her hands on the wall. She begged the police. Quote, "I thought she was going crazy," end quote, said Emma Parker. Her mom said that. And while Clyde is awaiting trial, Bonnie visits him in the Waco jail against her mother's wishes. She writes him long, passionate letters. Quote, "I know you are good, and I know you can make good. This outside world is a swell place, and we are young and should be happy like other boys and girls instead of being like we are," end quote.
The one thing that I'm glad about that we've evolved from is the word swell.
Swell. That's just swell.
I know that has nothing to do with anything, but it just makes me laugh every time I
now
hear that word.
Everybody's like, damn, that's nice.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that she called them boys and girls, like other boys and girls.
Yeah, and they're older, young
They're
adults.
19, 20.
Yeah.
Which is such a, their brain is not fully developed yet, but yes.
Right.
And then it happens. Teensy-tiny little Bonnie allows love to overpower her good judgment. While visiting Clyde in jail, Bonnie meets his cellmate, Frank Turner. And Frank claimed that he could break them both out of jail if he could just get his hands on a gun. He draws Bonnie a detailed map of the location of a gun in his parents' home. And she was to go to his address and find this gun. And the endeavor was a success. She literally took a hand-drawn map from her boyfriend's cellmate to his parents' house.
Wow.
And she goes in and gets this gun. She smuggles the .32 revolver between her breasts into the Waco jail. And I heard that it was held in there by a belt. And I thought, she weighs 80 pounds. Yeah, there's no cleavage to hold a revolver between those tiny little things.
She probably had a figure after she put the gun in there.
I mean, yeah, so she straps it in and she hands it to Clyde under the table. And Clyde and Frank use it to escape that very night.
Wow. Now,
the two men make their way to Illinois, stealing cars and robbing stores along the way. And as a precaution, they frequently change their license plates, as you would. Mm-hmm. But they're eventually captured by a passerby who memorized a plate number. And Frank and Clyde returned to the Texas jail. Then Clyde is sent to Eastham Prison Farm, 25 miles north of Huntsville, on April 21st, 1930, where he becomes prisoner number 63527. It's a 14-year sentence for his robberies.
Wow.
Clyde is 20. This is the same prison where his brother Buck has spent some time. This is a brutal place, and what happens to Clyde while he's there will affect him for the rest of his life. And before he goes to this prison, he's only been charged with burglary and auto theft. And a fellow convict said that Clyde came to Eastham Prison a schoolboy, but he changed into a rattlesnake.
Oh, wow.
So prison was hard on him, and you're about to find out why.
Okay.
While doing his time in Eastham, a fellow inmate, Ed Crowder, also known as Big Ed, sexually molested and sodomized Clyde.
Ooh.
In October of 1931, 6-foot, 200-pound Ed is murdered in the prison shower block. He stabbed 15 times.
Wow. Shanked.
He got shot. That's what I thought too. I was like, what'd they use to make a shank out of? And then I'm thinking to myself, they could smuggle guns into these places.
Exactly.
It was probably a real knife.
Yeah, I'm thinking a knife's not very
it wasn't that
difficult.
hard to procure.
Yeah.
An inmate named Aubrey Scully, who is serving a life term, is blamed, but he's not the killer. Clyde's the killer. Clyde wanted the man who'd sodomized him dead. He was tired from the workload in the fields surrounding the prison. He's on the chain gang. He missed Bonnie, and Clyde witnessed a young inmate's murder at the hands of an older convict. He was done.
Yeah.
He's 20 years old. He's been raped. He's been worked to death. The prison conditions are terrible. He was done. He was really done. Not to mention that there was a prison tender, a prisoner who had privileges of watching over other prisoners, named Wade McNabb. Wade was the tender at Eastham Camp No. 1, and Wade would boast that Clyde was his, quote, wife in prison.
Jeez.
But Ed is dead. Ed Crowder's dead. Big Ed's dead. Ed had to die. I wrote in my notes, Ed had to die, like Earl had to die. Ed had to die. But meanwhile, Clyde's mother is working really hard on the outside to get Clyde paroled. But Clyde can't take much more of Eastham. The conditions were so terrible that just to get out of the regular cell block, he had another inmate chop off his big toe and the one next to it, tall man, as I always called him.
Wow.
So he could be sent to the hospital and he could get the heck fire out of the general population. It was that bad.
Wow.
And in January of 1932, Clyde goes to the prison hospital. He's going to walk with a limp for the rest of his life. And 1 month later, because Clyde doesn't know his mom's working hard on the outside, Clyde is paroled 1 month after he chops off his toes.
Yeah, see, none of this was in the movie. So this is all new to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Clyde's paroled on February 2nd, 1932, thanks to his mama, who's been lobbying to get him out early. He leaves the prison on crutches.
Okay.
Now, when he emerges from Eastham, he's a damaged and dangerous man. The psychological damage done to him is pretty tough.
Yeah, I can't imagine after going through all that you would come out even remotely normal.
Yeah, and it's thought that Clyde was quite a control freak, and prison really triggered all of that in him because he had zero control.
Right.
Clyde decided long before leaving Eastham to seek revenge on the place. When he's released, he swears to everyone, including his mother, quote, "I'll never go back to that hellhole. I'll never be taken alive. They're gonna have to kill me."
Well,
end quote.
And what is that?
That's called foreshadowing.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, everybody talks about how soft and sexy Rob's voice is. So that's called foreshadowing.
That was really sexy. We might have to take a break. Just kidding. Just kidding.
It's okay. It's an explicit podcast.
I know. Hey, we're married. We're allowed to say
We're
that.
allowed till death do us part.
Mm-hmm.
Bonnie and Clyde began seeing each other again immediately following Clyde's release, and their love only grew more intense. Still bitter about the government's role in the Depression, Clyde decided to put together a new team of thieves to take the money that he felt was rightly theirs. It was almost like no one's going to help me. Nobody's helping me. There are no jobs. I'm taking what I want.
Right.
It's very dog eat dog. And here's the gang. Clyde, Bonnie, Raymond Hamilton, W.D. Jones, Henry Methvin, Clyde's brother Buck, and Buck's third wife, Blanche. Now, they're all not going to be together at the same time. Some of them are, but those are the main players. I just wanted to throw their names out now.
Right. And they are all in the movie.
Are they?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Blanche especially. She's a whiner.
Oh, well, Blanche is a unique individual.
Yeah.
Not wanting to let Bonnie out of his sight, Clyde took her along with the Barrow Gang on their first ride. This was the beginning of a crime spree that would spark her excitement for adventure and romance. So think about this. She's with this guy. She's never, her husband was a safecracker and a robber and all this other stuff.
Right.
But Clyde's taking her along in the car. She'll sit in the car.
Right.
And this is exciting to her.
Sure.
That's sexy. Look what he's doing. He's taking charge.
She liked
He's
the
in
bad
control.
boy.
She likes the bad boys. On their first joyride, they decide to rob a hardware store that sat directly across from the Kaufman Town Courthouse, which is probably not a good place to rob anything across
Right.
from a courthouse. It's Clyde, Bonnie, and Ralph Fultz. Bonnie was giddy with excitement until she heard the alarm. It was a botched attempt at a robbery, and according to some, here's what they were doing. Clyde's goal is to collect enough money and firepower to launch a raid against East Him Prison.
Oh, wow.
In fact, they were robbing the hardware store intending to steal guns. So from the beginning, he's always wanted to get enough firepower and enough money to raid that prison.
Wow. That was his whole goal in life.
That was his whole goal.
Wow.
Not wanting Bonnie to be punished for her involvement, Clyde dumps her from the car into a drainage ditch and told her to catch a bus back to Dallas, baby. Instead, she's picked up. She spends a night in a one-room dirt floor cell in the tiny town of Kemp. From there, she was transferred to a cell in Kaufman where she began writing her first poem. She's a poet, remember?
Okay.
The Story of Suicidal Sal.
Wow.
And I will post it in the In-Laws and Outlaws. She's a good writer.
Yeah.
She's not a bad writer.
Okay.
Yeah. Ralph Fultz was tried and convicted and served time. He would never rejoin the Barrows Gang. He was like, okay, one job, got caught. I'm out.
Yeah.
See ya.
You guys aren't too good, so
Yeah,
I'm out of
no,
here. See
I'm
ya.
not. Bonnie is released after a few months after a grand jury fails to indict her. And when she's released, she spends time with her mother or Clyde's family because Clyde is out, quote, making a living, end quote. On April 30th, 1932, Clyde was the getaway driver in a robbery in Hillsborough. Still in need of cash, Clyde and an accomplice decided to rob a local grocery store. The two men held the store owner, John, it's spelled Butcher. They pronounce it Butcher.
Okay.
And I wanted to make sure I got this man's name correct.
Butcher.
Butcher. It's
Okay.
Butcher. I would call that Butcher.
Yeah, if I owned a grocery store, I'd go by Butcher.
But the family name is Butcher. I've seen interviews. They all call him Mr. Butcher. John Butcher and his wife, they're held at gunpoint and they demanded that their safe be opened. And sometime during the unlocking of the safe, a gun is fired and John Butcher falls dead to the ground.
Uh-oh.
The men grabbed the money and fled. Unlike any previous robbery, this one involved murder for the
Right.
first time. And the wife of John Butcher identified the two men as Clyde and his accomplice, Ray Hamilton. And Butcher was thought to have been killed by Ted Rogers or Ray Hamilton, although the widow of Mr. Butcher identified the shooters to be Clyde and Ray. And many say that Clyde stayed inside the car. He had nothing to do with the murder of the grocer. He was the wheelman. And Clyde is actually known for his driving expertise. We're going to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
August 5th, 1932, they're on the road while passing through either Stringtown or Springfield, Oklahoma, because these sources differ so much about Bonnie and Clyde.
Okay.
The group came across a community dance. They want to let loose. They decided they're going to stop and join in the fun, and they're thinking that the police aren't going to be around. However, it's still prohibition, and two police officers were actually there,
Oh, gee.
and they noticed that Raymond Hamilton appeared to be drinking and swaying, not to the music. And Sheriff C.G. Maxwell and Deputy Eugene C. Moore approach the men to question them. Clyde and Hamilton immediately draw their weapons and fire. Almost instantly, both police officers were shot. Moore is killed and Maxwell is gravely wounded. Another of Clyde's accomplices, Everett Milligan, got caught up in the chaos following the shooting, and the police detained him. And while in custody, Milligan blurted out the names of the killers with whom he had been riding. Clyde realized that he had to get out of Oklahoma and put as much distance as he could between himself and the police. And Clyde and Hamilton escaped in a volley, that's what I read, a volley of gunfire, wrecking their car and stealing several other cars on their way to Dallas. So they would get a car, steal it. They'd go a little bit. They'd drop that one off. They'd steal another car.
Okay.
They were constantly stealing cars. There were too many to even list all the cars that they would steal.
Yeah, what I'm discovering in this, you telling the story, is that from the movie, they've like combined 3 different stories into one robbery.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because the grocery store thing and right across from the courthouse and all, there's one scene in there where it's like, okay, this is those 3 stories.
They put them all together.
Yep.
Well, Bonnie and her grandmother are sitting on the front porch when a member of Clyde's gang shows up with the bad news. Clyde's got to make a run for it, and he wants Bonnie to join him. And she says,
"No way, Josie.
Let's go."
Oh, okay.
Let's go. She didn't even hesitate. And from that night until the day these two meet their maker, they were never apart for more than a few hours.
Wow.
And Bonnie suggests they visit her aunt, Nettie Stamps, at her farm in New Mexico to regroup. She was like, okay, we got to get out of Oklahoma. You got to get out of Texas. Let's go to New Mexico. We'll go to my aunt's place.
Okay.
And while on their way to New Mexico, a police officer noticed their car's out-of-state license plate and decided to look it up. At the time, not many people had enough money to vacation, and out-of-state plates were a rare sight. And the car had been reported stolen a few days earlier, and after scouting the area where the car is sitting on the Stamps family property, the officers approached the door and they were greeted by Clyde's gun.
Wow.
Both Bonnie and Clyde forced the police officer into their car and took off. They take him with them.
Oh, wow.
And here's what happened. Her uncle, Mr. Stamps, noticed that something was wrong when Clyde drew his weapon. He calls the police to report the incident, and then the police are assuming that this officer has been murdered, but he's released unharmed. And this incident gave Bonnie and Clyde their infamous reputation, and it was seen in headlines all across America for the next few months. And the officer stated that one abductor went by the name of Ray Hamilton, and the other 2 were proud to give their names to him as Bonnie and Clyde. So that's the first time they really hit the newspapers together.
They're liking their infamy, basically.
Yeah, well, she does, especially. Remember, she wanted to be a star.
Yeah, she's an attention whore.
But they did not kill this police officer. They took him hostage, stole another car, got out of town, and they dropped him off.
Did they say why they didn't kill him?
I don't know that Clyde is a big proponent of shooting people up.
Right.
But the guys around him really are.
He just sounds like the type of person that if you corner him, he's going to.
Yes, and that's what his family said.
Yeah.
He's not going to shoot you unless he's trapped like a rat.
There you go.
On Monday, October 10th, 1932, members of the gang were thought to have taken part in a robbery of Little's grocery store on the corner of Wells Avenue and Vaden Street in Sherman, Texas. While supposedly buying and paying for meat and eggs, the bandits pulled a pistol and attempted to overpower 35-year-old Howard Hall and Homer Glaze, store employees, and to rob their cash register. Hall protested and fought with one of the gunmen. He was shot 3 times and died at the hospital. The shooter attempted also to shoot Glaze, but the gun jammed. The bandits made their escape, taking about $50 out of the cash register. No one was arrested for the crime, and though he denied committing the murder, Clyde Barrow fit the description of the assailant, described as being a small man of light complexion and being 20 to 25 years old. Hall was married and had at least 1 child. Hall is thought to have been killed by Clyde, though some would say that killing an unarmed man is just not something he would have done. Exactly. So,
Okay.
And I want to stop and say, I think when there were little roadside robberies and they didn't know who it was, they were like, oh, it's got to be Clyde Barrow and the Barrow Gang.
Yeah.
And that's really what they were called. They weren't called Bonnie and Clyde for a little bit. They were the Barrow Gang.
Yep.
Weary from the stress of the road, Clyde began to feel the weight of his crimes. He was shooting people in his way, but leaving behind witnesses who could easily identify him. The police considered him a smart criminal because he would do his jobs near the borders of most states so that he could cross the state line without being followed by the police. Pretty smart, right?
Yep.
The gang rarely stayed in one town for too long. While robbing a bank in Missouri, a guard discovered Clyde's intentions and began firing at him. Fired at him first. Clyde was able to dodge the shots, but only got out with $80 that was actually lying on the table in front of the teller. This, however, was not as disappointing as their next bank robbery. They came in guns blazing to hold up the next small-town bank they got to, and they got in there and realized The bank was empty. There was no money in the bank. It's the Depression. They had nothing.
Well, I was going to say, too, $80 back then, especially during the Depression, that's still a pretty good haul.
Sure, but he only got what was out of her drawer. One teller. He got what was from one teller.
Yeah.
Even if it was just for a short time, they decided to go back home to Texas and spend Christmas 1932 with their families. Clyde needed an accomplice since Ray Hamilton had been captured by the authorities. A boy named W.D. Jones had been a friend of the Barrows family since childhood. He joined Bonnie and Clyde on Christmas Eve, 1932, at the age of 16.
Holy cow.
And the three left Dallas that night. The first mission for WD was to steal a car in broad daylight. He bragged about doing this lots of times. I've done this plenty of times. I'll go steal a car in broad daylight. Done it a lot. But he was really nervous. And it's Christmas Day when they do this. They approach a car sitting in a driveway, and WD jumps out and he tries to start the vehicle. But he's having trouble. And after hearing all the failed attempts, neighbors start coming out of their houses like, what the heck fire's going on out here? Can't this guy get his car started? And the owner of the car, his name is Doyle Johnson, he'd been taking a nap. And he hears the commotion, and he runs to stop them from stealing it. But by that time, Clyde's like, get out of the way. Clyde's out of his car. He's attempting to start the car himself. And once he was able to get it started, the owner, Doyle, who was from Temple, Texas, and worked as a grocery store clerk, he jumps on the running board on the side of the car and tries to get Clyde out of the car and tries to remove the keys. And when Doyle did this, Clyde drew his weapon. And during the struggle, it is said that Clyde accidentally, I've got my air quotes up, shot the owner of the car, pushed his body to the curb, and sped off. Wow. And then Bonnie followed in the car behind.
Okay.
The car was found abandoned a few blocks away with both doors open. Johnson was taken to King's Daughters Hospital, where he died the following day. So all he had to do was steal a car, and WD screwed that up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, WD in the movie, he's kind of a buffoon.
Well, he's just young.
Yeah.
He's young.
Yeah, I think they exaggerated his character.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Now, they know they're not going to be able to go home for a while now. They headed for Dallas to say goodbye to their families. Bonnie and Clyde were able to get away most of the time because they were shielded by people who understood their actions, people who had also lost a great deal in the Depression. So it was almost like, I know you've done these bad things, but we're all in this together, and we love you because you're our family. We're going to protect you, help you get away.
Right.
They covered hundreds of thousands of miles, moving up and down the Midwest, robbing, killing, running from the law. Bonnie missed her mother terribly. She was prone to crying spells. Clyde developed a system to get messages to their families and arranged clandestine meetings. And when Emma Parker telephoned CUNY Barrow and said, quote, we're having red beans for supper, end quote, that's the signal that the kids are headed home.
Gotcha.
And Clyde was a maniac behind the wheel. He wrecked almost as many cars as he stole, but he developed really special skills. Remember I told you he was a wheelman.
Right.
Such as skidding 180-degree turns, and it made pursuing lawmen look like idiots. He stole nothing except Ford V8s, and I read that, and I know that he stole other cars, but maybe that was out of desperation. I think his favorite thing to steal was a Ford V8. Okay. It was the gold standard of fast autos back then. A V8 could hit 70 miles per hour in second gear and 90 miles an hour in third gear.
That's flying, baby.
And he pushed these cars to the limits. And police officers are stuck driving 4 or 6 cylinder Plymouths or Chevys. They got gerbils under the hood. And Clyde is just busting ass. He's hauling ass all the way down the road.
He's NASCAR back in the 30s, yeah.
Now, in the early 30s, it seemed that gangsters had all the advantages. Archaic laws prevented cops from chasing crooks across county or state lines. And then the liaisons between the law authorities were almost non-existent. Like, they didn't share information between this little town and that little town, especially in the days before radio communication. Cops communicated by phone.
Well, I was going to say, too, during that time, if you were 5 states apart, they probably didn't even know what was going on other than newspaper headlines.
And if you're not getting that area's
Yeah.
newspaper headline,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it's small towns.
Yeah, exactly.
But these cops communicated mostly by telephone. And the Barrow Gang, they learned to climb telephone poles and they would cut the wires on their way out of town.
Wow.
Their arsenal was far superior to anything most police departments could afford because they would break into National Guard armories, taking crates of 45s and Browning automatic rifles. And the BAR was Clyde's personal favorite. This thing, it makes the machine gun look like a toy.
Wow.
And the bullets for this thing are huge. It'll basically rip anything apart.
And I keep going back to the movie because that's the only story I know. So they use Tommy guns in the movie.
Yeah.
You know, with the round. So,
They have some of those and pistols.
But what these are like.
It's a BAR, a Browning automatic rifle.
Okay.
I will post in the In-Laws and Outlaws. There's actually a video that shows what a BAR will do.
Okay.
When I saw the video, it made me think of, there's a movie that Rob and I love called Red.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce Willis is sneaking out of his house and it's just a barrage of bullets and his whole front porch falls off. That's the kind of gun that this was.
Wow.
And on top of that, I read where local cops, local lawmen, they had to buy their own service weapon.
What?
And this is a time when nobody's making money. So they have Saturday night specials or a little
Daisy
revolver.
BB guns.
They've got something small that they have to reload and they're coming up against a man and they're driving these really slow cars with the gerbils under the hood.
Right.
And he's got a V8, a Ford V8 going 90 miles an hour with Army firepower in his backseat.
It's like Ralphie and his.
You're going to shoot an eye out. Yeah, that's kind of what the cops had. But this BAR is Clyde's personal favorite. And the weapon usually identified with cops and robbers of this period was the Thompson machine gun, exactly what you were talking about, the Tommy gun.
Right.
And though the Tommy gun was a terrifying weapon, Clyde considered it inaccurate and unreliable. So there's something that's different for the movie.
Yeah, the Tommy gun it was fallible. I mean, it would jam and it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the BAR, on the other hand, could fire a 20-round clip in 3 seconds and rip the side off an armored car.
Gee whiz.
And Clyde's BAR was custom fitted with a 57-round banana clip.
Oh, man.
If he started shooting, he was not stopping.
Yeah.
And while Clyde is obsessed with guns, he had purchased Bonnie a brown Kodak box camera. And she loved to take photos. They loved to take photos. They took photos of themselves playing about with each other. Bonnie pretended to shoot Clyde. They took a picture with her on his shoulders. And most famous of all, there's a photo that has been taken.
With the guns.
With Bonnie with a cigar between her teeth and a pistol in her hand, looking like the perfect gun mole.
Yep, I remember that one.
And here's the thing. Bonnie didn't handle guns. She normally didn't touch the guns. And she smoked cigarettes, not cigars. But it was just for fun.
Yeah.
They were having fun when they stopped to take those photographs.
She was an actress.
She was an actress. In March 1933, Clyde's brother Buck is released from prison. Buck's been in jail this whole time. Not jail, prison at Eastham. As expected, he joined up with Clyde and brought along his new bride, Blanche, a woman who will later write a biography from jail. The gang decided to rent an apartment in Joplin, Missouri, and they figured they could stick around for a few months before taking off again. They're going to lay low. They're going to go to Joplin. They chose a newly constructed apartment at 34th Street and Oak Ridge Drive as the place where the brothers were going to reunite. And on April 1st, 1933, Paul Freeman, the developer of the Freeman Grove Addition in South Joplin, was approached by a man who wanted to rent the apartment. The man introduced himself as W.I. Callahan, an engineer from Minneapolis, Minnesota. The apartment at that time was on the outskirts of town, but it was 2 blocks from South Main Street. For 12 days and nights, Bonnie and Clyde, the Barrows, and W.D. Jones lived peacefully in the 2-bedroom apartment. I thought that was kind of weird because it's like there's a couple here, and a 17-year-old on the couch.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's their lackey,
Right.
Which I think he probably was. A delivery boy would bring them groceries. The boy would later say that the occupants of the apartment seemed like ordinary people. They're just ordinary folks. However, their unusual activity caught the attention of the neighbors, and they reported them to the police. And the police think It's bootleggers.
Ah.
They think it's bootleggers. And the cars in the driveway come up stolen. They come over and they're like, well, let's just run the plates on these cars. And the cars in the driveway come up as stolen vehicles.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so we got something hinky going on here. They're probably bootleggers.
Right.
On April 13th, police and detectives approached the apartment. Clyde, noticing the commotion, alerted the rest of his gang. And suddenly, WD just begins shooting. And Clyde motioned for Bonnie, Buck, and Blanche and WD to move into the garage because that's where the car is parked. Blanche was so hysterical, she couldn't comprehend what was going on. She goes running out the back door. Everybody's getting in the car to make a getaway, and Blanche is like, "Wah!"
Yeah, Blanche was a little...
I've got my arms up in the air like running. Yeah. She goes running down the street. Out the back door. I also heard she had a little dog with her, and the dog ran off. The dog was never found again. But Clyde...
Smart dog.
Yeah, really. Clyde gets everybody into this Ford truck, and they rev the engine, and then they just bust through the garage door.
Well, that's one way.
In this car. And they're just smashing right through the blockade, and they pull away, and they spot Blanche, who's running down the road screaming, "Ah!" And Clyde slows down just enough for Buck to pick her ass up and throw her into the truck. Like, she's running down the road. They're driving down the road. He opens the door, swoops her, grabs her, and pulls her in.
See, that's a movie scene. That should have been in the movie.
Yeah. And while evidence inside the apartment easily identified Bonnie and Clyde for the police, the new couple was a mystery until the police discovered Blanche's purse and Buck's parole papers.
Wow.
And then they find rolls of undeveloped film and the camera that Clyde had bought for Bonnie.
Oh,
this is where these infamous pictures come from. I will post all of them in the In-Laws and Outlaws.
Okay.
For the next few weeks, the gang lived like nomads. They're constantly on the run, hiding out in creek bottoms, hobo camps. They're eating cold cans of beans and potted meat. I bet that wasn't in the movie.
No.
They were broke, they were sick, they were exhausted, and they were half crazy. Bonnie and Clyde quarreled frequently, as you might if you were only feeding me pork and beans cold out of a can on the river bottom.
Yep.
I might be like, I want to go home.
My kingdom for a hot dog.
I want to go home. But they fight a lot, and Bonnie even announces that she's hitchhiking back to her mom. She's like, I'm out of here. I'm hitchhiking home. Clyde chases her across a cornfield. He carries her back. She's kicking and crying. He did arrange for a family meeting, however, in the East Texas town of Commerce. At that meeting, Emma Parker, Bonnie's mom, begs Bonnie to surrender. And here's what Bonnie says, quote, Clyde's name is up, Mama. He'll be killed sooner or later because he's never going to give up. And when he dies, I want to die too, end quote. Blanche Barrow's memoir says it was far from glamorous. Quote, we lived in the car day and night with very little sleep, just driving like mad, going no place. We had to keep ahead of the cops. If we stayed in one place very long, they would catch up with us, end quote.
Wow.
It was the reality of being on the run. She also said this, quote, we drove so much and so fast most of the day and night, sleeping only a few hours at a time. We drove through South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and west through Mississippi, end quote. I already told you they always switched plates, but now they started using local plates. Okay. After the whole New Mexico thing, he's like, I got to steal me some plates that are from here so we don't look suspicious.
Right.
They'd have all these high-speed chases, and when they hit a new state line, the authorities couldn't cross over or do anything. They're powerless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's thought that they were as far south as Florida at times, as far east as Indiana and Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, Kansas. Clyde thought nothing of traveling 500 miles in a day, and if they're being chased, he would travel as many as 1,000 miles in a 24-hour period.
Wow.
Fast cars, big guns. That's what I wrote in my notes.
Yep.
Yeah. Their tactics attracted what was to become the FBI. So all these bad guys, Dillinger, Babyface Nelson,
right.
All of them, this is what formed the FBI. But what was going on with Bonnie and Clyde attracted the Bureau of Investigation. J. Edgar Hoover was personally and privately outraged that Clyde had been raiding National Guard armories and stealing these BAR rifles. But federal jurisdiction didn't include robbery or murder. But guess what? Because of Bonnie and Clyde, it now covered the movement of stolen cars across state lines. They're like,
wow.
we can't get him. They're like, well, then we're going to change the law.
So he set precedent.
Now we're going to be able to go across state lines and go after him.
Wow.
And here's what J. Edgar Hoover said, quote, in the last year alone, it was necessary for local law enforcement officers in the cities and communities of America to kill nearly 400 members of the underworld, who fully armed sought to cause a death of the officers who came to arrest them,
Wow.
end quote.
Wow.
400 members of the underworld.
Wow.
May 1993, a federal warrant is issued against Bonnie and Clyde for auto theft. They changed that. Auto theft, federal warrant, we're out to get them. And this is the only way that J. Edgar Hoover can go after them. And he does. Meanwhile, the newspapers are all over this story that the authorities can't seem to pin down Bonnie and Clyde. And then the photos are made public, and suddenly Bonnie and Clyde are national news. People loved them. They thought they were cute, and Bonnie was finally famous, just like she'd always wanted.
Wow.
And, you know, they're trying to sell papers.
Sure.
And so everybody knew there's, you know, Bonnie and Clyde, it's really the Barrow Gang, but they called them Bonnie and Clyde because that sold papers, and it was a good little story.
They were looking for the equivalent of clicks.
They were looking for clicks. It was clickbait. Exactly. But Bonnie and Clyde realize that the police are becoming wise to how they're doing stuff. But realizing that the police were becoming wise to their actions, the gang decided they needed to steal a new car and change their license plates even more frequently. And again, they choose Clyde's favorite car, a Ford V8, and in broad daylight, they steal this car. And the owner of the car, his name is Dillard Darby. He's a mortician in Ruston, Louisiana. And Dillard's having lunch at his boarding house when he witnessed WD stealing his car. And he's furious. He borrows his neighbor car, Sophia Stone. He's like, hey, I need your car. I'm going to chase after them. And she's like, fine, you can take the car, but I'm going with you.
She wants
so
a little action.
So Dillard and Sophia hop into Sophia's car, and they're off. They're off after his own car. And when he happens upon his own car, he only sees WD behind the wheel. And then another car pulls up, and it's the rest of the Barrow Gang arriving in a second car. And they all had their guns pointed at Dillard. Is there a problem, officers?
Yeah. There's that.
I wrote two of them in. Is there a problem, officers?
Nice one.
Bonnie, Clyde, and the gang thought it was so funny that Dillard had chased after them. They were like, dude, we're impressed. You came out, you were like, I'm not taking this lying down. I'm coming after my own car.
Right.
There was a minor scuffle, and Bonnie insisted that their lives be spared. And these two, Dillard and Sophia, are taken hostage and driven around the rest of the night, only stopping for food. And the next morning, they're dropped off miles from home. But Clyde gives them $5, but no car. And when Bonnie finds out during the night when they're driving around that Dillard is an undertaker, she tells him that she hopes when the time comes, he'll be the one to, quote, work on them.
Wow.
End quote.
Wow.
That's called foreshadowing.
There's that sexy voice again.
Uh-huh. After dropping the two hostages off, the gang guns down the highway toward Wellington, Texas, unaware of recent road maintenance. Ahead, a bridge over the Salt River had been removed for repairs, and none of the members in the car noticed any signs alerting them. So it's like, stop, go back, road ends, whatever, and they're just down the road. I also read that the bridge had washed away.
Okay.
So whether it had washed away or it had been removed, there's no bridge.
There's no bridge.
And Clyde's behind the wheel. He's unable to stop in time. Clyde hits the brakes. He slides into the ravine. Their car sails across the dry wash, rolls over twice, lands upside down, and bursts into flames.
Oh, wow.
And Bonnie is trapped inside.
Wow.
This is what I read. Clyde worked like a demon to free her as she screamed in pain and begged him to kill her.
Wow. I
She's
didn't know
on
any
fire.
Of this. Wow.
So there are two reports that the car was on fire and that was what burnt her. But I believe also the battery acid from the car's battery had broken open and it's leaking on her legs.
Wow.
They pull Bonnie out from under the hood just before the car explodes. She had fourth-degree burns on one of her thighs, and her dress had been ripped to shreds. It was a severe injury, and the flesh was burnt all the way to the bone in some places.
Gee whiz.
Bonnie is never going to fully recover from this, and she won't ever be able to fully straighten her leg for the rest of her life. She will walk, if she's not being carried by Clyde, with a limp.
Wow.
So they both limp. Clyde limps because he doesn't have a big toe or tall man next door.
Right. So now they have everything in common.
I know, right? I don't know what that toe's called. I just always called him tall man. So he doesn't have two toes. And, your big toe is how you balance.
Sure.
So he limps, and now she's going to limp as well.
Wow.
They carry her away, and while they waited in a tourist court near Fort Smith, Arkansas, for Bonnie's leg to heal, other gang members botched a robbery and killed a man named Henry Humphrey, the town marshal of Alma, Arkansas. He'd been working the night shift, and in the early morning hours of June 22nd, 1933, he was surprised by Bonnie and Clyde's gang. They forced him into the town bank, tied him to a pillar with baling wire, and stole the bank's small safe. They even stole Humphrey's gun. But that's not the kicker. Humphrey is not a lucky guy. So listen to this. The next afternoon, Humphrey again, unexpectedly, runs into the gang, this time on a road north of town. He sees them, a shootout ensues, and Humphrey is mortally wounded, and the gang then stole his replacement gun. They take his first gun, tie him up. The next day he sees him. He tries to have a shootout with them. They kill him, and they take his replacement gun.
Yeah, adding insult to injury, no pun intended.
Yeah. And even during this time, despite the seriousness of Bonnie's burns, they got to go. They've got to flee. They've got to pack her up and go.
I mean, how long did it take for her to heal up to where she could even...
She was never fully healed, I don't think.
Wow.
She was never really fully healed.
Did they take a break or anything?
They tried, but then they're out.
Yeah.
The gang's out robbing and stealing and murdering, so they got to go.
Yeah, so this...
She was in the back of the car.
Wow.
She was in the back of the car all
Things
the
are
time.
going downhill fast.
You'd think. On July 18th, 1933, just a month later, Bonnie, Clyde, Blanche, Buck, and W.D. stop at a small roadside motel. It was called a motor court. I had to look up what a motor court was, but that's a roadside motel back then. 6 miles south of Platte City, Missouri. Nearby was the Red Crown Tavern, and the manager of the bar and the local sheriff were very interested in the 5 young people who had rented the cabins of the roadside motel. And Blanche goes in, she gets the keys, the 2 cabins, so they could stay the night. And very suspicious of this, the night clerk watches the gang unload Bonnie. They're carrying a woman.
Right.
And they're also carrying a bunch of firearms. They observe W.D. teasing Blanche about her weight when they're in the tavern getting some food for everybody. The locals think they're a bunch of school kids on a summer trip because they're all small and very young looking. I mean, Bonnie's 4'11", W.D.'s only 17, Clyde's only 23. The oldest one is Buck.
Yeah.
But they're paying for everything, not with bills, but coins, which is kind of a red flag. And I wrote in the margin, my money don't jingle, jingle, it folds. Well, their money did jingle, jingle. It didn't fold. So the tavern owner and the motor lodge people think, okay, well, they're kids, they're paying with coins. And a day after they arrive, Blanche drives into Platte City to buy some medical supplies for the burns on Bonnie's leg. And the pharmacist thinks it's hinky that they needed this ointment and bandages, especially because the police had let the pharmacies in the area know to be on the lookout. They've crashed this car. They know this is a stolen car. They think it's the Barrow Gang. Somebody's got to be hurt.
Right.
Be on the lookout for someone who's coming in to get supplies like they're treating someone in a hospital.
Right.
And the police are starting to think, okay, we got this report of these kids, 3 men, 2 women, bandages. It might be the Barrow Gang.
2 plus 2.
2 plus 2 equals 4. So the Missouri Highway Patrol and the Kansas City Police Department are called, and they ask for them to come to the tavern and be sure you bring some firepower with you. Be heavily armed when you come. And they even bring an armored car.
Wow.
11 p.m. on July 19th, police move into place. The armored car was pulled up to block the garage where they had their car parked, and the local sheriff pounds on Blanche and Buck's door. Squad cars lined up around the area while a police officer banged his flashlight on Buck's door loud enough for both cabins to hear. When Clyde hears the policeman call out, "Open up!" He knows it's bad.
Yeah.
This is the situation, and he begins shooting right away.
Wow.
Clyde opens fire through the garage door and wounds one of the officers, and he takes out the armored car with a barrage of bullets from the BAR. He takes down an armored car with this thing. WD also opens fire, and the armored car is hit, and the horn is hit on the armored car. Mm-hmm. They hit the horn on it, and everyone thinks this is a ceasefire signal. Ugh. And the armored car is pulled back. Ugh. We're done. And the Barrow Gang peels out.
Yeah.
But Buck is hit, and Blanche was hit in the left eye with flying glass. They make their getaway going 85 miles an hour. Clyde is the wheelman. He skids into the Dexfield Amusement Park and campsite just north of Dexter, Iowa. It was just enough privacy to check out the wounds of Buck and Blanche. And a nearby hunter spots the group by the river, and he alerts the police. Bonnie warned the gang about these approaching officers, and Clyde once again loads everybody up into the nearest car, and they speed off. The police, however, had surrounded them and had begun firing, and both Bonnie and Clyde took bullets. In the commotion, Clyde smashes the car into a tree. He and Bonnie get out of the car on foot and run into the forest, while Buck and Blanche flew out of the car on the opposite side and remained there. They're just like covering up from the bullets. It's every man for himself at this point.
Right.
They've just scattered.
Like rats.
They're all on foot and heading toward the river. Buck and Blanche stay together and head northwest. WD and a wounded Bonnie hide in the underbrush next to a stream from the river. So she's trying to recover from this burn on her leg, and she's also been shot.
Did they say where she was shot?
She was shot in the stomach. It was buckshot.
Oh, okay.
So she has buckshot in the stomach. She's bleeding.
Right.
She is falling apart. There's not a whole lot of her left.
Right.
Yeah. Clyde is wounded during the shootout. He crosses the river and moves into a cornfield. At 5:45 a.m., this is when Clyde meets Marvell Feller, a dairy farmer. Mm-hmm. And Clyde tells him, quote, "All we want is a way to get out of here," end quote. And the authorities know they've sprayed this whole crew up with bullets, so they're thinking maybe we've killed one or two of them. So they ask volunteers to help look for bodies. It doesn't matter that these are killers or whatever. They just get local people. Hey, we think we got them. Come on, let's go look for some dead bodies.
We're going to have a search party.
We don't know. They're heavily armed. You've got a stick to go through the grass or something.
Search party with beer.
Right. But they aren't dead. And the search party makes it all the way to the old riverbed, and they see this log. It's about 4 feet high, 8 feet long, this big log. And they see heel marks that have slid down in the mud to the riverbank.
Okay.
It's Buck. Meanwhile, at the dairy farm, Clyde whistles and W.D. Jones comes out of the cornfield. He's got Bonnie on his back. He sets her down, and Mr. Feller asks, "What do you want us to do?" And he says, "You put one arm," meaning Bonnie's, "around your neck, and you put one arm around her," because at this point his young son has shown up. "Put your arm around her. I want you to carry Bonnie." And Clyde had been grazed across the face, so his face is bleeding, and he'd been shot in the shoulder.
Okay.
He's bleeding. And Bonnie's been hit with buckshot in the stomach.
Right.
So her dress is just torn to tatters, and her stomach's bleeding. Meanwhile, farther north, Blanche gets up from behind this log, and this posse of men who are looking for dead bodies, they find her. She's wearing pants and riding boots and dark sunglasses. She was a little dirty from being by the riverbank. Right. Her husband is lying on the ground. He can't move. Buck can't move.
Right.
They demanded that Buck could get up. They asked him if he's armed. Buck doesn't answer. Blanche is hysterical because Buck isn't answering or moving.
Because she can't see.
His head is open, his brain is exposed.
Oh.
They get Buck up, and they made him walk for a bit, and then he would pass out. I suppose so. And then they'd drag him for a little bit, and then he'd try to walk again and collapse. It was about a fourth of a mile. It was a quarter of a mile before they got Blanche and Buck to where the authorities were and where the famous photo of Blanche is taken. I'll share it in In-Laws and Outlaws. She's struggling. She's got her sunglasses on.
Wow.
She's got on the pants, and
she's
yelling at everybody. There are tons of photos to share in the In-Laws and Outlaws this week.
Good.
But this famous photo was taken by the Iowa Register's staff photographer. I don't think he's ever been credited with this. But Buck is hurt pretty bad, if you can see his brain. He was white as a sheet, and his head's exposed. How he was walking is beyond me, but he's taken to King's Daughters Hospital, where he dies.
Right.
Meanwhile, Clyde gets in this car supplied by the farmer, And he didn't know how to drive the farmer's 1929 Plymouth.
Oh,
It was a stick shift.
he's only driven an automatic?
I guess
Wow.
he can't drive this car, and they had to show him how to drive the car. And once they do, he drives away. Clyde tells Marvell Feller, the farmer, "You'll be well repaid for this." And I've seen an interview with his son who said that the authorities censored his dad's mail for years and that the farmer is still waiting for his payback. But Bonnie and Clyde are still on the loose. A few weeks later in Mississippi, Clyde sends W.D. Jones off alone to steal a car, and the boy steals the car, and he just keeps on going.
I'm out of here.
I'm yeeting out. I'm done. I've had enough of this glamorous outlaw life.
Yep.
I'm out. Bonnie and Clyde lay low between the months of August and October 1933, but soon after in November, they emerged to hold up a payroll office in Texas. W.D. had given up running and the police pick him up, claiming Clyde forced him into crime. He cooperates with the police. He gives them all the information they might need to help track down Bonnie and Clyde. W.D. sings like a canary.
Right.
He's like, I wasn't doing this. They were making me do this.
They had a gun to my head.
Yeah. Bonnie's sick, tired. She misses her mother terribly. W.D. tells the police that Bonnie and Clyde always go see their mamas.
Okay.
And the plan is to meet them on an isolated road in northeast Dallas. And I read that this is how they communicated with the family. Remember I told you about the whole, we're going to have red beans?
Right.
Well, Bonnie and Clyde would sometimes write a note, put it inside an empty Coke bottle, then drop it from the car in the front yard and just drive away. And it would tell them where and when to meet.
Texting's easier.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But isn't that funny? They
Yeah.
put it in an empty Coke bottle and just sort of like drop it nonchalantly on the side in front of one of the houses.
Yeah.
And then they would know that that was a message in a bottle from Bonnie and Clyde.
Wow. Kind of genius, actually.
Right. It would tell them where to meet up. And Clyde's mama would bring beans and cornbread for them to eat. I got that out of an interview with Clyde's youngest sister. She was like, yeah, Mama would sometimes bring beans and cornbread for them. We'd pass it across the car to them, see how they were doing.
More beans, please.
More beans. Yeah.
What movie is that from?
There are way too many movie references in today. That made me laugh. Okay. Authorities tell the lead detective on the case, his name is Ted Hinton, to put out all the stops to capture these offenders. Hinton checked into upcoming Parker or Barrow family holidays, hoping they might attract Bonnie and Clyde. And sure enough, Clyde's mama, she had a birthday in just a few days. And he's thinking, he's going to go see his mama.
Yep.
Surveillance of a nearby gas station alerted Hinton to the couple's movement to the family gathering spot. Dallas County Sheriff, this guy's name is Smoot Schmidt.
These names.
Smoot Schmidt.
Dylan Smoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He and his deputies waited in ambush. They're armed with 2 Thompson submachine guns, Tommies, and a .351 bullhead repeating rifle.
Wow.
But Clyde smelled trouble.
Yeah.
And he sped past this ambush. And the posse then starts shooting up his car. But Bonnie and Clyde escaped on 3 flat tires with relatively minor wounds. Once inside the car, Clyde began shooting back with his machine gun. In spite of these setbacks and the fact that nearly every lawman in the country was looking for them, Clyde was already planning his next big job, a daring, many would say, insane raid on the Eastham Prison Farm.
Yeah.
His initial target all along.
He's going to go out with what he intended to do, right?
With what he intended to do. Right. But here's the thing. So this Ted Hinton guy, he's set everything up. He's done all this stuff. And just because Clyde gets a feeling, his spidey senses go up. He's like, something's hinky.
Yep.
I'm not going. Then they shoot at him. And authorities, again, they look like idiots compared to these guys, compared to Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde had escaped yet again, and the police learned their lesson. Next time, there would be no warning. Yeah. And on January 16th, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde mounted a jailbreak for their old accomplice, Ray Hamilton, who was facing 263 years of hard time in Eastham Prison.
Sorry.
Hamilton had planned the escape himself from inside with some help from his older brother Floyd, who rounded up the necessary guns and people. Why did Clyde Barrow agree to come along? Well, Barrow and Hamilton had joined forces in 1932, but were bitter rivals by then, and the Barrow Gang was in tatters. Death, arrest, desertion.
Right.
Attrition. It was a terrible toll on their whole crew, and Bonnie and Clyde were at their lowest point. So why take a risk? Why now, when you're at your lowest, do you go after the biggest target? And every historian has said Clyde took that with him to the grave. Only Clyde knows why he would do it then.
Well, he had nothing to lose at that point.
Maybe. He'd never talked about his time at Easton Prison, not to his family, not even to Bonnie. And at this time, prisons across the country were notoriously brutal and inhumane. But this isolated prison farm was the worst of the worst. And I want to tell you a little bit about Easton Prison.
Okay.
Beatings of prisoners were common, as were punishments, such as being locked in a sheet metal sweat box or made to, quote, ride the barrel, standing all day on a barrel with your hands cuffed to an overhead pipe.
Wow.
A guard known as Boss Killer specialized in what inmates called spot killings. He would separate a particularly troublesome prisoner from the rest of the group. He'd march him outside and up a hill and kill him. He'd execute him with a pistol.
Wow.
Then he would file a report of another escape attempt thwarted by him.
Wow.
And his decisive action.
Wow. Things have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we now know that Clyde had been raped in prison and he hated Eastham. And on the day that they decide to do this, a cold fog shrouded Eastham the early morning of January 16th, 1934. There was a line of prisoners trotting out to clear a field for spring planting. So I keep thinking this is like the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
So they're taking them out of the prison cells to work in the fields. But guns have been planted in the fields. And Raymond Hamilton and another prisoner, Joe Palmer, were armed with smuggled .45 automatics. Clyde and James Mullins, a mercenary hired for the job by Floyd Hamilton, hid in the trees, each with a BAR. So they've got these huge guns. And Bonnie is in the car, where she always is. She's in the getaway car. When the mounted guard, he's on a horse, rides up close to the work detail, Palmer shoots him in the stomach. Then he turns and shoots another guard. And then Bonnie sounds the horn, knowing that the two guards are dead, and directs the escapees to the car. Honk, honk, this way. Head up the hill this way.
Taxi's here.
Only Hamilton and Palmer were part of the escape plan, but Clyde permitted 2 additional inmates to join them. These guys were like, you got to take me with you. And he says, okay, but this is going to be a mistake. One of the added escapees was a thick-set, pimply-faced 21-year-old boy named Henry Methvin.
Okay.
That is also called foreshadowing.
Uh-oh.
In all this commotion and the guards being shot, one of the guards is killed. And the Texas authorities are beside themselves. They're outraged. Not only have they killed guards and taken prisoners, they did it at the Eastham camp.
Right.
Where all these hardened criminals were. It was Clyde's first victory in months, and he reveled. He gloried in his triumph. Once again, he had a gang to lead because he had these guys, and as soon as things cooled down, they burglarized a National Guard armory in the oil boom town of Ranger, Texas, then hit a bank in Lancaster. But the old rivalry between Hamilton and Clyde simmered below the surface.
Okay.
And Raymond Hamilton, he insisted he was bringing his girlfriend. If Bonnie's here, I'm bringing my woman. You got your side piece. I want my side piece here.
I want my Yoko Ono with me.
Well, Yoko Ono's name is Mary O'Dare, an oversexed redhead who flirted with all the men in the gang. And Bonnie hated Mary.
No, wow.
And Bonnie called her that washerwoman. I don't know what a washerwoman is, but that's what she called her, a washerwoman. So maybe she was a launderer or something. I don't know. Someone email me if you know that. But Bonnie and Clyde, they're fighting a little bit, and having Mary there, that's not helping any. Because I'm sure she was like, get her out of here.
Right.
I'm Bonnie. I'm the girl in the gang.
Right.
Mary's got to go.
Right.
But they start to quarrel. And this prompts Mary to suggest to Bonnie that they poison Clyde.
What?
She's like, well, you're fighting with him. Let's just kill him. And then Raymond flirts recklessly with Bonnie just to piss off Clyde. And then Raymond comes to Bonnie and says, we should knock off Clyde. So Mary and Raymond are both coming to Bonnie and saying, let's get rid of Clyde.
Wow.
Yeah. And the final argument between Clyde and Raymond, I read that it was between the two macho men, was how to split money that they had acquired in a robbery and who would decide on the jobs. And Raymond called Clyde a small-time twerp.
No.
And Clyde called him a yellow punk.
Wow.
The mean words were flying.
Yep.
In early March 1934, Raymond Hamilton and his girlfriend Mary leave the gang for good and begin pulling their own bank jobs. And a few weeks later, Raymond wrote a letter to his attorney, which was published in a Dallas newspaper, disassociating himself from the Barrow Gang and accusing Clyde of being a trigger-happy killer and a petty hold-up man not worthy of Raymond's time.
Oh, wow.
So he writes this letter to his attorney, which gets published in the paper, which was like, I'm not a part of the Barrow Gang, but if you want to know what he's like, this is it.
Wow.
When Clyde read Raymond's letter, he swore revenge and plotted to kill him. He's like, I'm coming after you.
Yep.
Now, Clyde had a premonition that the end was near, and I read that and I thought, yeah, how could you not think that the end is near? I don't know that that's so much a premonition or you're like, okay.
Yeah.
This is going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah. I've used up my 9 lives.
Yes. At a family gathering at a cemetery near Lancaster, he tried to persuade Bonnie to surrender and spare herself his fate. Quote, I know somebody will put me on the spot soon, end quote. Bonnie says, nope, I can't even consider this. But he was dead right about somebody putting him on the spot, right down to the use of that colorful phrase. Politicians and lawmen, including the Texas Rangers, were being ridiculed unmercifully in the media. And after Smoot Schmidt's failed ambush...
Say that 10 times fast.
After his failed ambush, the headlines were typically caustic, to the delight of the Dallas newsboys who called out, quote, read all about it. Sheriff escapes from Clyde Barrow.
Oh.
No one was more embarrassed by the Eastham breakout and the murder of a guard than a man named Lee Simmons, who was the general manager of the Texas prison system, who had been hired specifically to prevent things like that happening. Simmons made a daring quasi-legal decision to hire former Texas Ranger Frank Hamer and commission him to eliminate Bonnie and Clyde. And Hamer dated back to the days when Rangers patrolled on horseback, and he had in his long career killed at least 53 outlaws.
Wow.
Simmons' mandate to the old Ranger was simple and direct. Quote, I want you to put Clyde and Bonnie on the spot and shoot everyone in sight, end quote.
Wow.
So here comes Frank, and here comes J. Edgar Hoover. Everybody's pissed. Everybody's mad.
Yep.
They can't catch or kill Bonnie and Clyde or the Barrow Gang. And the newspapers are making this mockery of them. And they've been shown in all the papers as Bonnie and Clyde by these little pictures. And people love it, and they're mesmerized by it. They're actually kind of cheering for Bonnie and Clyde.
It's all romanticized.
Yeah. So Frank Hamer sets up his operations center in Dallas, knowing that he would find informants there. That's where they live. That's where his family is. We're going to set up here. And Sheriff Smoot Schmidt had assigned 2 deputies, Bob Alcorn and Ted Hinton, to work full-time on the case. And the assignment must have come as something of a jolt to Hinton, who had befriended Bonnie in her days as a waitress at a cafe near the courthouse. He had actually flirted and joked with her.
Oh, man.
And the notion of helping bring about her demise, that couldn't have sat too well with him. In fact, there were those who thought Ted had a huge crush on Bonnie, and Bob Alcorn was actually the officer who arrested Clyde way back when he was stealing Christmas turkeys with his brother Buck. So it's all kind of coming full circle, right?
Yeah.
Sheriff Smoot Schmidt handpicked these 2 because he thought they might be the closest thing to an insider that they had. And these 2 might be able to find informants who could tip them off as to the whereabouts of Bonnie and Clyde, because they're local guys, right?
Right.
Frank Hamer didn't care how he got him. He would bend the rules, but he was going to get him. He adopted an outlaw lifestyle. He got a Ford V8. He traveled and tracked and acted like them. He knew what kind of whiskey they drank, what kind of car they drove, where they ate. He lived out of his car while he's tracking them. He's trying to mimic them. He knew what kind of cigarettes they bought, what type of food they would eat.
He was a profiler.
He was a profiler. He's not given up. He's like, I want to be immersed in what they're doing so I can think like Clyde.
Right.
So Clyde's met his match. Frank has long been thought of as a Lone Ranger, but FBI records show that he was actually working with the federal agents. And let me tell you, the FBI records on Bonnie and Clyde were only released in 2006, with some more being released in 2009.
Oh, wow.
But Frank is working with the FBI, what will become the FBI. He's working with J. Edgar Hoover, even though everybody thinks that Frank is the Lone Ranger.
Gotcha.
He's not. And behind the scenes, the intelligence agency is making available to Frank everything they know. And on top of that, Bonnie and Clyde's family's telephones have officially been tapped.
Yeah.
So they're watching the families. They're listening to the families. They're watching everything.
Right.
And while the cops ran their traps, Clyde had agreed to arrange a rendezvous between Bonnie and her mom. Remember, she loves her mom.
Yeah.
He selects a meadow off a dirt road near the town of Grapevine, a place they had used before for meetings, and early that afternoon, all seemed fine. Bonnie is grooming this pet rabbit. His name is Sunny Boy. She bought him as a present for her mother. Clyde's taking a nap in the back seat of the V8, and I read where this actual Ford V8 had canary yellow wheels.
He was a gangsta.
Yeah. Henry Methvin, who's joined their gang, is keeping a lookout for Raymond Hamilton, right? Because he's out there. Clyde had heard on the radio that the hated Hamilton had robbed a bank in a town south of Dallas, kidnapping a mother and her 4-year-old child to help in the getaway. He felt sure that Raymond was headed toward Grapevine. So he's waiting for Raymond. He thinks he's going to ambush Raymond. And he planned to kill him on sight, but Raymond never shows up. Instead, who does show up are 2 highway patrolmen, E.B. Wheeler and H.D. Murphy. They're cruising by on their motorcycles, and they notice a black V8 with canary yellow wheels.
Uh-oh.
The exact description of the car that Hamilton was last seen driving. And when Methvin saw that they were stopping, he retrieves his BAR. Clyde slips out of the back seat, stands behind the car with a sawed-off shotgun. He intended to take the lawmen prisoners. But when he shouts, "Let's take 'em," Henry Methvin mistook this meaning to be fire. And he opens fire and he shoots Wheeler in the chest. Clyde killed the second officer as he was going for his gun. Henry Methvin then administered the coup de grace with a handgun, firing point blank at the fallen officers. Then the gang hightailed it for Oklahoma, where trigger-happy Henry Methvin shot and killed a 63-year-old constable.
Wow.
But Henry Methvin isn't a part of the official version of the story at Grapevine, Texas. You have a really hard time finding his name in the papers about any of this, and that's because Frank Hamer and J. Edgar Hoover are about to, weave this narrative. Now Bonnie and Clyde have killed these 2 police officers on their motorcycle for no reason whatsoever. They just stopped and then they shot them.
Right.
And J. Edgar Hoover and Frank Hamer are out to portray them as ruthless killers so that everyone will cheer when they are dead. So the killer in the paper was not Henry Methvin. It was Bonnie and Clyde.
Gotcha.
It's all about Bonnie and Clyde. And you really don't read about Henry until way later, years later, that that's what actually went down. The records show that Henry Methvin's family was all ready to betray Bonnie and Clyde. They were going to give them up. It was a deal that Frank Hamer made with Henry's dad.
Okay.
So hold that thought.
All right.
News of the killings of the 2 patrolmen outraged people all over the country. Over the next few weeks, there were dozens of reported sightings of Bonnie and Clyde, some as far north as Indiana. Radio bulletins advised people to stay inside with their doors and windows locked. Rumors, misinformation, and speculation, it just fed the public fear. And not just in the daily media, but in pulp fiction magazines that raced to print the latest Bonnie and Clyde assaults.
Wow.
And one self-proclaimed eyewitness to the Grapevine murders told the police that after the first 2 bursts of gunfire, he saw a short, blonde woman stand over one of the fallen officers and blast away with her patrol, exclaiming, quote, "Look-a there, his head bounced, just like a rubber ball,"
Oh, my
end
gosh.
quote.
Wow.
The story is completely made up.
Right.
That never happened because Bonnie didn't shoot anybody.
Right.
Bonnie and Clyde ran for a little bit longer, robbing stores along the way. They knew they were going to be caught eventually. It was only a matter of time. On May 6th, they had one last visit with their families. Bonnie passed a poem about their exploits, which her mother published later in the papers. I'll share it in the In-Laws and Outlaws. And noting the pattern of family visits, the police are easily able to predict their next destination. May 1934, Clyde moves his headquarters temporarily to Gippsland, Louisiana, home of Henry Methvin. It's a small logging town, and Henry has offered to help to find Bonnie and Clyde a hideout.
Okay.
This is a huge mistake for Bonnie and Clyde. This was a farming family, the Methvins, very rural, the farthest thing from the life of a national gangster on the run. And I saw an interview where the townspeople weren't all that taken with the Methvins. They were crude. They weren't nice. They would resort to violence if they needed to get what they wanted. So it's not like, oh, they're the Methvins. They're so nice.
Right.
We see them at church on Sunday. I just took over some, pie. That's not the Methvins. But the gang takes an old abandoned home. Otis Cole was the man who, through Henry Methvin's dad, Ivan, or Ivy, as he is known, gave permission for the Barrow Gang to hide away in this old dilapidated house. It was a perfect hideout because you could barely get to this house by car.
Right.
But Bonnie and Clyde aren't really hiding out. They're out and about with lots of townspeople, and the locals are seeing them on a regular basis. One of the residents told a story when she was a little girl about Bonnie and Clyde pulling up to the store, to the filling station. He got gas. She stayed in the car. But before Clyde left, he bought her name was Lavon Cole, and her cousin each a 5-cent Orange Crush drink before he left. They didn't ask for it. He just gets them an Orange Crush after he fills up the car. Bonnie stays in the car, and he gives both little girls a drink.
This guy is
Walks
like
away.
a complex figure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one part of him that's got a heart, and then the other part of him, he's just...
A ruthless killer.
Yeah.
Mrs. Canfield's Cafe is where they would go to eat. And I mean, people knew. They knew they were hiding out in this town. Their photos are out. They've been out in the newspapers.
Why aren't they reporting this?
I think they're probably afraid.
Yeah, understandable.
And the local grocery would remember that Bonnie would go into the store and Clyde would stay in the car. And all the stores, it seemed like someone was always staying in the car, like maybe because that's where the guns were, but you had to get a quick getaway. I don't know. Somebody always waited in the car.
Yeah.
My guess is that car was running too.
Yeah.
But of course, when Bonnie goes into this little store, she has her limp. She has a noticeable limp. She's tiny. She's very thin. Ivy contacts the local sheriff. His name is Henderson Jordan, which is pronounced Jordan. And he says, look it, my son's in deep. He's killed 2 people in Texas. I want him out. I'll serve you up Bonnie and Clyde on a silver platter if you let my boy off the hook. He cuts a deal. And here's the deal. Henry will set up Bonnie and Clyde to be captured or killed. Sheriff Jordan contacts Frank Hamer immediately and says, I know something you don't know. Does it just like that, too.
Everybody's puffing their chest out.
Yeah. But Ivy contacts Frank himself because he's the one who can contact the Texas governor's office, and he's the one who can make the deal, actually.
Right.
So he goes to the sheriff first, but then he's like, dude, I'm going over your head. I'm going to Frank.
Right.
Because Frank's really got the power here. So these arrangements are made, and the plan is that Jordan and his deputy, Prentice Oakley, would be in charge of the whole thing because it's Louisiana, and that's their jurisdiction.
Right.
Plus, it looks good on them, right? This is our town. Everybody, including J. Edgar Hoover, is after Bonnie and Clyde. And this small town sheriff, he's the one who's going to get the job done.
Right.
Like, I feel like he's already got his thumbs in his overalls, and his suspenders. So here's who is in town to make this happen. Tom Hinton and Bob Alcorn are there. Sheriff Jordan and his deputy, Prentice Oakley. And Frank Hamer and Ben Maney Galt, both Texas Rangers, okay?
Okay.
And they have firepower, and they're about to come face-to-face with Bonnie and Clyde in the flesh. And they want to see them first because they want to ID them, because Frank doesn't want to ambush the wrong couple. So he's seen them in pictures. He's never seen them up close. So he cases them, follows them, sees them. Okay, that's Bonnie and Clyde. Now we know what the target is.
Positive ID.
Right. So they've got these 6 men, 2 locals, 2 from Dallas area, and then 2 Texas Rangers. And they have the governor's pardon for Henry Methvin. That's what they've got.
Gotcha.
This is going to be the deadliest, best armed brigade that Bonnie and Clyde have ever faced. And they're being set up. They're literally about to encounter an army.
Yeah.
On Monday, the 21st of May, 1934, Frank Hamer assembles the 6 officers on a remote country road. And here's where they were. These 6 men are waiting in Gibson, Louisiana, near Henry Methvin's family's homestead. They are in the bushes. They are literally in the weeds for 2 days and 2 nights. They stay there.
Wow.
They're hungry. They're tired. And they're just waiting with all this firepower for Bonnie and Clyde to come down this road. Early on the morning of May 23rd, 1934, the men are hiding in the brush, ready for their ambush. Ivy Methvin parks his car on the side of the road in a specific area where it would be easy for the posse to identify Bonnie and Clyde and shoot at them. And here's the plan. The plan is that Ivy's going to pretend that he has a flat tire.
Right.
And Clyde will know this truck because he actually bought this truck for Ivy. And he'll think Ivy's in need of assistance and he'll stop and see what he can do to help. Because Clyde's a good guy, I guess. He's going to stop and help. Now, I saw and read where there were kids on their way to school that morning coming down this road. I think it's Highway 154. And they remember that Mr. Methvin's truck's on the side of the road. And when I read that, I was like, wait a second. They're planning on having a shootout. And there are kids on a school bus.
Yeah.
I have my hands on my forehead right now. Like, can you even believe this? And then I thought, if it all happened at the same time and the kids were, would they have aborted the mission?
Yeah.
Would they have had to come up with something else? I don't know. Who knows? But one of the residents remembers the school bus driver stopping and asking Mr. Methvin, do you need help? It's the school bus driver. His name was Mr. Cole Nope. And this is sometime between 7:30 and 8 a.m. because school starts at 8.
Right.
And this is all going down on Highway 154. I was correct. I thought I knew that from my notes. But there were people plowing nearby in the fields, like alongside the road, who are going to witness this whole thing. It's going to happen, I feel like, no matter who was around.
Right.
And that morning, Bonnie and Clyde set off in their stolen car, a Ford V8, hoping to meet Henry Methvin. Clyde was armed. Bonnie's in the front seat. Clyde's got a sawed-off shotgun, 3 Browning automatic rifles, 3 BARs, and a loaded pistol. He also has a bag containing another 10 or 11 handguns.
Okay.
This car's a rolling armory, but this time they're going to meet an army, a barrage, these guys waiting in the weeds. These 6 boys are waiting, and they have themselves a BAR, just like Bonnie and Clyde. So they're facing the firepower of an army platoon. They're going to shoot them on sight. And just after 9:15 on May 23rd, the game of cat and mouse is finally over. Bonnie and Clyde come over the hill. They stop to see if he needs help with the tire.
Right.
2 shots ring out. 1, 2. Prentice Oakley fires the first 2 shots, and the first one was fatal and into Clyde's head. I've read that they could hear Bonnie scream. And then the others just riddled the car with bullets. They just started shooting. And when I say riddle, I mean they riddled this car with bullets.
I've seen pictures of the car, and it's just amazing.
Yeah. In the story that's going to be told by Frank Hamer, he steps into the road and says, stop, halt, stop the car, and come out with your hands up. And then Prentice Oakley was the first one to shoot. But I think what really happened is they came over the hill, paused, and Prentice Oakley, boom, boom. He just shot him right then.
Yep.
The car jerks and rolls into a ditch. They go after the car, shooting it the whole time. They're going after this car. And now the school is so near that after the shots are fired, they can hear all of this. And the kids actually get permission from their teacher to go outside and see what's happening. The kids actually go up to the crime scene and see all the bloody bodies.
Oh, jeez.
And people are showing up out of the fields and stuff, and they start to take things from the car.
Wow.
Bonnie's wearing a red rust dress. She's fallen forward. In one hand, she has a pack of cigarettes. There's a magazine on the floor. Her fingers have actually been shot off. They were both so full of bullet holes.
Wow.
The car is towed to Arcadia with the bodies inside.
Oh, man.
And the coroner takes him inside. They were really shot up. Clyde's spinal cord is severed. He's shot in the head. And as the story goes, around 6,000 people showed up in this teensy-weensy tiny Louisiana town. And the ambush posse posed proudly and endlessly for photographers.
Wow.
Now, the next day, both families came from Texas to claim the bodies of Bonnie and Clyde. They were taking their loved ones home to Texas to be laid to rest. The mortician, well, It's Dillard Darby, the man that they kidnapped along with his friend when he went after his car. And he tried to embalm them, and their bodies wouldn't hold the embalming fluid because they were so shot up.
Wow.
The car had 167 holes. Bonnie had 53 bullet wounds to her body. Clyde had 51.
Wow.
They're laid to rest separately and not together as they wanted. The families didn't want them buried side by side, and they even had separate funerals. The Barrow family showed up for Bonnie's funeral. The Parkers did not go to Clyde's funeral. Bonnie's mom was the one who said Clyde couldn't have her for an eternity. He had her for 3 years, and it did her no good.
Wow.
There are lots and lots of stories, and some are true, some are not. As for the rest of the gang, Roy Thornton dies during an attempted jailbreak from East End Prison in 1937. Ralph Fultz would continue to rob and be in and out of prison until 1944 when he's pardoned and takes a job as a security officer before finding Jesus and then becoming a public speaker to kids on the ways of crime. He also lobbied for prison reform. He died in 1993.
Oh, wow.
He was 82.
Wow.
Raymond Hamilton was in prison when Bonnie and Clyde met their maker. He was executed on May 10th, 1935 in Texas. Hamilton never publicly admitted to killing anyone, although to his brother Floyd, he admitted that in the case of killing the sheriff, Eugene Moore, in August of 1932 in Stringtown, Oklahoma, he was not so sure. Quote, Clyde and I were both shooting, end quote, Raymond told Floyd.
Yeah.
It could have been either of us, or both. Raymond Hamilton was convicted of the murder of John Butcher of Hillsborough on May 1st, 1932. He was executed by electric chair. His last words, quote, well, goodbye all, end quote.
Wow.
Joe Palmer, another one of the Barrow Gang, was executed right along with him. Blanche Barrow was sentenced to 10 years in the Missouri State Penitentiary. She was given a full pardon in 1939. She goes home to Texas and then remarried and moved to Oklahoma. She ran a beauty shop for a while. When her second husband dies, she moves home to Dallas and renews relationships with her family. She was totally blind in the left eye as a result of the Platte City shootout. She died of cancer in 1988. W.D. Jones was sentenced to 17 years for the Malcolm Davis shooting and for aiding and abetting Bonnie and Clyde. When he's released, he worked various jobs, picking cotton among them. Jones lived the rest of his life in Houston and for many years next door to his mother. He married, but his wife died in the mid-1960s. He became addicted to pain-killing drugs. And after 1967, the year Arthur Penn's romanticized film ignited a new generation's interest in the Barrow Gang, his arrest made the local news. And Jones said of Bonnie and Clyde, quote, it made it all look sort of glamorous, but like I told them teenage boys sitting near me at the drive-in showing, take it from an old man who was there, it was hell, end quote.
Wow.
In 1968, Jones described his life on the run with Bonnie and Clyde in a colorful interview with Playboy magazine and spoke here and there to young people, warning them to stay away from a life of crime. Henry Methvin was pardoned in Texas for turning over Bonnie and Clyde, but he didn't turn over a new leaf, and he wasn't pardoned in Oklahoma, where he murdered a police officer. For that, he went to jail, where he would try to escape so many times he was put in the hole until his trial, where he was found guilty and sentenced to death, a sentence that was commuted to life in September of 1936. He was paroled in 1942. He stayed in trouble and was eventually killed by an oncoming train in 1948 while trying to cross a railroad while intoxicated. Henry Methvin was cut into 2 pieces.
Oh.
According to Blanche in her memoir, she said, quote, I was glad they died together. That way, no one had to deal with the grief of losing the other, end quote. And according to Frank Hamer, quote, I've not much to say now. It's all over. The ends of law and justice have been served, end quote.
Wow.
I'll leave you with the last lines of Bonnie's poem. Someday they will go down together and they will bury them side by side. To a few it means grief. To the law it is relief. But it is death to Bonnie and Clyde. And that's all I have to say about that. Hey, Hitched to Homicide listeners. This is Chris Calvert. I love doing research and writing about real crimes, but I also love writing about fictional people who commit horrible atrocities. When you're ready to take a break from true crime for fictional crime, go to chriscalvert.com, where you'll find all my books, including some free ones to get you started. Jane Doe is one badass chick who quietly hunts terrorists in the United States. The Sex and Lies books are all FBI and CIA cases with a little romance on the side. And coming summer 2022, Book 10 in the series, Sex, Lies, and Rock and Roll, releases. You can find all of these books everywhere, and if you like to listen instead of read, you can find them all on Audible. So go grab a free book or take a listen. I love all the characters I've written. I've given them pain, ruined their lives, make them suffer, and maybe even throw in a heroic death. Or maybe they live to fight another day. Check it all out at chriscalvert.com, and thanks for being a listener of Hitched to Homicide.
Wow, that's a great story.
I know, right?
Well, and here's the thing. I love the movie, the Warren Beatty movie. It's an awesome movie. There's so much more to this story and obviously in a movie they can't cover everything because it'd
Was her leg burnt in the movie?
No, they didn't cover. I didn't know any of that.
Did they limp in the movie? Either one of them?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, no, none of that. None of that was in there. But it's kind of obvious.
That's not very sexy for Warren Beatty.
Yeah,
to have a limp.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
I could see that.
With everything that happened, it'd be a 12-hour movie.
Not just a 12-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Hope you didn't have to walk the dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Too much. Yeah.
No, that was great. Okay, well, that being said, let's do a little Bless Your Heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, here we go. Norwegian police fine hitman because he didn't carry out contract killing as promised. We'll put this under the file of what? This is from the Irish Mirror. Norwegian police have fined a man 850 pounds because he offered to carry out a contract killing with no intention of fulfilling his promise.
Oh my gosh.
The bizarre case involves a 21-year-old man who agreed to take cash to kill a 17-year-old youth. He was paid by another 21-year-old man who said he wanted the teenager dead because he had rejected his romantic advances.
I want him dead because he doesn't like me.
Exactly.
Okay.
Fortunately, police busted the plot before anyone came to harm, but they were unable to prove the alleged hitman had any intention to complete his task. Here we go.
Why would they want him to complete his task?
to complete his task, and so could only charge him with fraud. His client who ordered...
so stupid.
I know. His client who ordered the killing was sentenced to 2 years in prison, but most of this has been suspended because he confessed.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess if you confess...
I guess. He claims to have paid 5,150 pounds, or about $6,300 in American dollars, for the job, but the fraudster said he received only 3,500 pounds, or roughly $4,300 in American cash. The 21-year-old was forced to pay out an additional 850 pounds for fraud after failing to fulfill his promise to kill the 17-year-old.
What about conspiring to murder or something?
I don't know. It's just so...
This just means you can get sued for anything.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be hot coffee from McDonald's anymore.
Oh, my gosh.
That's just nuts. So there you go. There's your Bless Your Heart.
Bless his heart?
Oh,
He got it coming and going. Well,
Yeah.
if you have a Bless Your Heart and you want to send it to us, you can send it to Chris at hitchedtohomicide.com.
Yep.
Or you can go to the website. All you have to do is use the little drop-down menu.
Yep.
And there's a little place where you can bless somebody's heart, or you can suggest a case. We like both of those things.
Send them in.
Send them in. We're glad you're back with us again this
Yes.
week. That's my husband, my amazing redheaded husband over there.
And that's my beautiful blonde bride.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.